If Commissioner Zell would lead us in honoring this great nation.
Join me in honoring the flag. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Commissioner Bilberry, would you lead us in a word of prayer?
Father God, we come to you today. We thank you for this day that you made. And Father, we just ask that each person here that's represented, Father, you keep your hand on them. You keep your hand on our county and our country and all those elected officials that are making decisions. And today, the decisions that need to be made, Father, that you lead and guide us through your Holy Spirit. And we thank you for your Son, Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Ms. Cindy, do we have a quorum of the Chaves County Board of Commissioners?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Yes, you do.
Thank you. Okay, so we're here today. This is to coordinate the draft Lincoln National Forest Plan and NEPA analysis as it relates to the plans and policies of Chaves, Eddy, Lincoln, and Otero counties with the U.S. Forest Service in the Lincoln National Forest. With that being said, I'd kind of like to introduce. We have a number of commissioners in here, and we have a number of officials from the Forest Service Department. We have Miss Diana Prather. Am I saying that? Thank you. And then Travis Mosley, and then Lauren. I have to apologize. I did not remember your last name. Raven. Okay, thank you. So they're here from the United States Forest Service. And then from Eddy County, we have County Manager Alan Davis. And Commissioner Beard is down at this end. Do we have anybody else from Eddy that's a commissioner or official? From Otero County, do we have RB here? RB's over there. And then we have Commissioner Marquette, Miss Vicki Marquette from Otero. Do we have anybody else from Otero here, Commissioner? No? Okay. And then from Lincoln County, we've got sitting up here with us Mr. Barber, who is their land and natural resources. Land and natural resources. And then I think that we got Commissioner Todd Proctor, who's down further on the dais here, and then we do have a couple of other commissioners from Lincoln County, Doc Willard and Elaine Allen. And then, of course, we have all of our Chaves County Board of Commissioners here. And I know we have a lot of significant titles out there as far as the ranchers, a lot of history sitting in this room right now. So we really appreciate everybody being here. We've got some former Chaves County commissioners here. Guy sitting over there, I think, is Kim Chesser? That's what I was thinking, Kim.
Right here?
Yeah, I was thinking that's who it was, but for some reason, I don't know. And then Commissioner Bobby
Well, I
Thorne.
put my hair on top.
Right. And then we have a representative from, representation from Representative Harrell's office with Ms. Kim Perry sitting in the audience also. Am I missing any other notables? Candy's here? Where's the fire? There it is. All right. Sweet Candy, Representative Ezell. Thank you for being here today. I know you don't have anything better to do, right? So thank you guys all for being here. Really and truly, I mean, today is really, I think, an important day for all four of our counties to really kind of get into the mix of finding out where we're headed with our public lands in each of our counties. There's a lot of different thought processes that are going on right now in the country and trying to protect our lands and conserve and protect endangered species, and there's just so many things that are on the plate. And so today, hopefully, we'll get to where we have some understanding of where we're headed in our four counties and with the Lincoln National Forest. As I saw a report just recently that the Lincoln National Forest is probably at the top of the list as far as fire hazards come this summer. So we could see some, and everybody else is looking around in Arizona and California and Colorado and everywhere else with these fires that we're having. And it's extremely important that we do a good job of supporting our Forest Service guys, but at the same time doing our own due diligence to make sure that we're doing our part in this still, and coordinating with our agencies that we work with, whether it's BLM, Forest Service, or any of the others. So with that, we're going to jump to agenda item 2, which is the U.S. Forest Service update on status of the draft of the Lincoln National Forest Plan. So I don't know if that's for Travis or Diane or who's prepared to give us an update on that.
Test. Okay, so the Lincoln National Forest is revising its land management plan. I wanted to give some background for folks that may not know what's going on. And this is the overarching plan for the management of the forest. It has to be done every 15 to 20 years or when conditions have changed. And according to the 2012 planning rule, we're right for it. And so the whole region, Arizona, New Mexico, all the forests have been going through land management plan revision. Okay. We went through a process of doing an assessment of all the resources and the condition, and then came up with statements for needs for change, say vegetation that might need treatment or watersheds that might need repair. So from that, we developed a preliminary draft plan that was published for comment. Those comments were incorporated into a draft plan, and a draft EIS with alternatives was developed. That came out from August through November, last summer, last fall, for public comment. We received approximately 1,700 comments. The forest has been going through those comments, responding to them, noting where we need to make edits to the plan, edits to the EIS. And that's where we are currently. And once the forest has gone through that, we're going to submit that to our regional office where we have additional specialists. They will review what we've done, turn it back to us. It's going to be an iterative process. We will make more changes, more edits, more clarification, refinement. Then the next step is, once things are really solidified, it will go, a biological assessment will be prepared for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Following that, we'll come out with a draft record of decision, which Travis will make a decision on which alternative, and there's 4 alternatives in the EIS. We'll come out with a final plan and a final EIS, and that we're anticipating late fall of 2022, maybe into the winter. And then we'll go into an objection period for 60 days when people can file objections. Once we work through that, there will be a final RUD, and we're anticipating the spring of 2023. Any questions?
Commissioners up here, any questions? Mr. Barber, do you have any questions for Ms. Prather? You can go ahead and pull that down towards you.
I've been involved with the CBLA as well as this plan for quite a long time. And one of the things that concerns me, and one of the things that got us here where we are today with this meeting so far down the road, is I'd made a recommendation about 2 years ago that we establish collaboration teams. Can we do that now? Because we're kind of behind the 8 ball as far as the county's getting involved and really being in touch. I know you've had public meetings, and I've been to those public meetings, but they were, for a better term, they were sorely lacking in input from, I think, a lot of people. And that, so is there any way we could form a collaboration team with the groups that are represented at this table so that we can work with you guys while you're putting this together? I think that's allowed in Chapter 70 of the handbook, your handbook, to have collaboration teams. And like I said, we did it in the Cibola, and it worked real well, and we got a lot of good input. We may not get everything we want, but the fact that we were at the table while you were doing this made it a lot easier. And so that's my first question.
The short answer, I believe, is yes. Back in 2019, the counties were invited to be cooperating agencies, but we can enter into a cooperating agency agreement at any time in this process.
Okay, because I'm the chair of the Lincoln County Land Rack, and I never saw that invitation or anything like that. And I don't think the county manager at the time saw that as well. So we need to work on our communications.
I agree.
It's
And I
sorely
think,
lacking.
I think
because-
there's an additional agenda topic to talk about.
Okay. And that, so you're working on the current comments now.
Yes.
Do you have a time frame of when you're going to let people know when or if their comments are accepted?
Yeah, that information will be available, and time frame. Look at this.
Will it be on your website?
We can post it to the website.
Well, that's good, but I know that you'll publish them in the end as part of an appendix to the EIS. But that's, for us, that's way too late.
Okay.
We need to know now where you're going based on the comments that have been submitted and that. Because we'd like to work together with you. Again, collaborating agencies would be a good way to go.
Okay, I hear you. When our regional office gets through looking at what we've written, and they're good with what we come up with, we can post that.
Thank you. That's the only one I've got, Brad.
Thank you, Mr. Barber. Ms. Prather, I'm just kind of, one of the things that causes concern for me, and I appreciate Mr. Barber talk about collaborating, but in this instance, in putting these plans together, and I'm not sure about the other county managers, other county commissioners, but we really were not aware of this up until probably 4 months ago, Bill, 5 months ago. And so one of my biggest concerns is the fact that we should be actually coordinating with the Forest Service in putting these plans together. And I'm just curious as to who the Forest Service has been working with in putting these plans together to make these decisions for the 4 counties and creating these wilderness areas that are in there.
Okay, the agencies that did accept cooperating agency status were the New Mexico Game and Fish, New Mexico Department of Agriculture, and the Otero Soil and Water Conservation District.
But none of the 4 counties that are
The counties
represented.
did not accept.
And did the Forest Service meet with the county managers and explain to them what was going on, or
I
you
personally,
sent out an email in 2019 that just kind of said we're going to start doing this?
went to Otero County, hand-delivered the invitations, and gave them a presentation inviting them.
Otero.
We've also
Okay.
gone to Lincoln County and given presentations and updates on the status of all of our projects.
To the commissioners. Okay. And so Eddie and Chavez just kind of have a little bit of a piece here, so we're not really.
That wasn't the intent. Generally, our line officers, our district rangers and such attend. They're the government-facing entity in the Forest Service. They generally attend county commissioner meetings.
Okay. And just out of curiosity, what is the figure of acreage that this plan or these plans that you're looking at as far as turning the acreage into wilderness areas?
Okay, there are 4 alternatives based on comments we got from the public. We've got public that don't want any wilderness. We've public that maybe a little bit they'd be okay with. We've also got publics that want a lot of wilderness. So I'd have to get the appendix there. I know that the maximum one is 200,000 acres. The smallest is 0. And then I believe there's an alternative with about 20,000. Do you have it?
Yeah. This is Robert Barber. I've got that open up. Alternative B recommends 40,500 acres. Alternative C is 402,000 acres, 402,000 acres. Alternative D, again, is 40,500, and alternative E is 21,900.
Correct. And it's up to, it'll be Travis's decision which alternative he picks, based on comment.
And so I guess I'm curious about the public meetings that you had leading up to this point in time. Did you have all of your ranchers and people who had skin in the game, as it would be for grazing areas and water rights and all the things that come with creating these wilderness areas that would take that away from a lot of the people that are sitting here in the room?
Sir, I personally annually have gone to the Lincoln National Forest allotment owners and briefed them. I specifically went at the beginning of the comment period on the drafts and the development of these alternatives and presented this material to them. I gave them advice on how to prepare comments. I didn't tell them what to say, but I made suggestions on being clear and concise or whatever, and make comments. They turned around and developed a presentation, which they gave to me, the district ranger, and to Travis, that was full of really good information, which we added to the project record, and we have incorporated their comments.
Good. Well, thank you for that. And I don't have the document that Mr. Barber has in front of him, but part of that appendix, I know you named off some of the different entities that have worked with you on putting this plan together. But are there any other outside agencies that aren't state of New Mexico or federal agencies that worked with you guys on putting these plans together?
Not as a cooperating agency, but we did receive comments from the Department of Defense.
That's probably good. All right. Thank you, Ms. Prather. Commissioners, anybody else up here that have any questions? Commissioner Beard.
I have one simple question. What's motivating this? What's broken? What's wrong that the government feels like this needs to be done?
The 2012 planning rule is what's motivating this. And specifically, it says that we have to do a recommended wilderness evaluation in the law.
So that would be just an evaluation?
Mm-hmm. Congress is the only authority that can designate wilderness.
Ms. Prather, I got another question. And correct me if I'm wrong, but can Congress and the President select areas that are in the EIS as alternatives, and the alternatives that Travis doesn't sign? Let's say he signs alternative B. Can Congress go, because that's his recommendation, but since the EIS covers the other 360,000 acres, can Congress go in and pick and choose from those 360 if they want to increase it?
You're asking me to speculate on what Congress...
No, I'm not asking you to speculate on what they would do.
No,
I'm asking you what they...
I would
Can
say...
they do that?
I would, probably yes.
Because it's already covered under the EIS.
Well, it's not even that the Forest Service has done an EIS. I suspect that if there was enough public support and you worked with your congressman or congresswoman, that they could then put something forward even without talking to us. When I worked for the BLM over in Las Cruces, we didn't have a lot to say.
Well, that basically answers my question. So I get the impression that because you've done an EIS on the inventory and analysis done, then they can choose pick and choose what they want to, and then we would have to work directly with them when they did that and took the bill to Congress, right?
Let me address that a little bit. So, thank you for having us here today. Yes, to answer that, Congress can act independent of the
what you
executive
decide.
branch, right? And you know, they promulgated the law, so they can act to designate, or even in the case of certain areas like on the southern end of the Guadalupe Ranger District, that is a recommended wilderness study area designated by Congress. That it has not been designated as a wilderness area, but so they can, and so can the president can recommend virtually anything out there. They could designate the whole Lincoln National Forest if they so choose, but that usually is predicated on a lot of public input. So yeah, that doesn't necessarily have to come through us for Congress to act on designating wilderness. And the president can act on designated, he can recommend it and direct us to manage it as though it were wilderness to preserve the values. But again, through this process, the land management planning process and the 2012 rule, we're charged with making an evaluation of our entire forest of what areas have certain values, and then we make a recommendation in our EIS and the final record of decision as to what we would recommend that Congress consider.
The reason I ask is it's more for the rest of us, is so that we don't get hung up on focusing on the proposed alternative B, and we remember that we've got 402,000 acres out there that are potential fair game for Congress and to be named.
Conceivably, yes, I suppose,
Yeah.
or the entirety of the Lincoln, but the likelihood of that is, I wouldn't anticipate that. It just doesn't have the values.
Yeah. Thank you.
So Travis, and I'm glad you're at the podium at the moment, because I heard Diane say that you were going to be recommending one of these plans to whoever, whether it's A, B, C, D, E, that it's going to be something that you'll recommend to Washington on which one to pick. And I would ask, because we've been through this with the BLM, with the Carlsbad RMP plan, and so you know, one of the things that ended up putting the brakes on that was, you know, pretty much the fact that we as Chaves County really did not have part of the coordination with that. But I guess my question is there is a plan where there's no changes, correct? Mm-hmm. And I know that was one of the plans that was within the Carlsbad RMP, which we're pretty much right there at the moment, where there really is not any changes to that. And so I would hope, in my personal opinion, when it comes down to the end of this process, that whatever those changes are will be minimal when the final product is put together. But what I want to do real quick, you guys here, is kind of have Margaret Byfield here kind of talk about our coordinating and cooperating status on this plan. So, Margaret, would you?
Well, I just want to address, because we're talking about three different processes, you know, already in this meeting to begin with: the collaboration process, the cooperative process, and the coordination process. And just to kind of clarify and kind of set forth what we really want to focus on here today, the collaboration process is to get the public involved in the planning process. You know, you can get your stakeholders together. They can meet, come up with a plan, work with you. I mean, everybody can be involved in that stakeholder meeting and come up with plan recommendations and bring them to you. You guys can be involved in those meetings. Obviously, you're usually hosting them. And they make a recommendation, and you can choose whether to accept them, advance them, or not. That's the collaboration process, which is a good process to get the public involved. The cooperative agency process then is something different, and it's unique and specific to the NEPA process. So when you're doing your environmental impact statement, that's when the cooperative agency process is triggered. So you file your notice of intent to revise the plan and conduct an environmental impact statement, and that's when cooperative agency begins, and you can go out in advance at that point to invite participants into that process to develop the analysis. What's important to understand about that process, though, is the purpose of that is to develop the analysis. It's separate from the plan. So there's different responsibilities under the NEPA process. So one of the reasons why I think Chavez County probably wasn't too interested in joining in the cooperative agency process is because they don't want to help develop the analysis. They have plenty of other things to do. What they want to be involved in is the actual plan itself, what that's going to look like. And that's the third process, which is coordination, which the National Forest Management Act, which this plan is being built under, requires that you coordinate the planning and the revision and development of the resource plan with local governments. And I think what gets a little bit confusing about the three processes, because we tend to blend them all together and talk about them like they're interchangeable, but they're not. Coordination is specific to local and state governments, entities that have planning processes. So in other words, Chavez County has a land use plan, a natural resource plan. They have planning authority. And so they are at a higher level than the public. They are not the public. They represent the public. And they've been given planning authority in which your forest is in their area, as well as all of the other 3 counties. So it's different, and that's why it gets frustrating from the county's perspective to be lumped into the cooperative agency process and collaboration process when that does not give the counties the voice that they should have in this process. And specifically, the Forest Management Act and then the planning rules require that you have outreach to the local governments to sit down and look at consider their plan and incorporate that early in the process into your planning process. So, that's one of the first things that should have happened in this whole process was when you did your assessment, when you did your inventory. It's great the outreach that you did to the public, but you didn't do the coordination with the counties. And out of all the entities, they're the ones with planning authority who are going to be directly impacted, by those decisions. So I know we had this conversation on the phone before, and to say, well, we can start doing that now doesn't solve the problem of how much information is now in that analyzed environmental impact statement that's moving forward that can be selected without having the benefit of the county's plans and the county's positions, which are required to be incorporated throughout that plan, and even under NEPA to be included in that environmental impact statement. So I think that's what we really want to focus on today, because that's the whole part of this planning process that has been missing. There has been no coordination with the counties. And I can speak on behalf of Otero and Chavez County, because we've had those conversations. But let me just read in your planning rules, 2016 planning rules, under assessment. So this is really the beginning of your process. When you do that assessment to decide, do we need to revise the plan? And if so, what are the changes we need to make? Where are the problems? And it says, under assessment, paragraph A2, 219.6, coordinate with or provide opportunities for the regional forest or agency staff and research and development, federally recognized Indian tribes and Alaska Native corporations and other governmental parties. So that's your local governments. They're to be coordinated with in the very beginning. In the planning rules, there's other direction which very specifically says you're supposed to look at the county plans in the beginning, consider them, identify conflicts. All of these things are supposed to have been done at this assessment phase before it even gets into the drafting of a plan. And so that's the frustration, is that's what the law requires. As Diane was saying, you guys are required to follow the law. That's what the National Forest Management Act requires of the agency, and that's what has been missing in this whole process. So we're now, so I know we're going to have the conversation of cooperative agency and the coordination agreement that we advanced so that we can get an actual process together that will consider the local perspective. But that's one thing that I want to make very clear as we're talking about these three terms. What the counties are interested in is the coordination. That's what's been missing in this.
Might I address a couple of things you said that stood out to me? So I don't disagree that there's those things in the law that you just expressed. One of the things that I caught there is opportunities to do so, right? That we have to afford those opportunities to do so. And, you know, I asked our folks, like, well, what have we done to date? And we've held 46 meetings already. We've, you know, dating back to when we started this in 2015. It's been published. There's been lots of opportunities out there. So, while I don't disagree that we could sit down and spend a lot more time face-to-face going through these, where are those, you know, incongruencies, where are the congruencies? You know, and there's still opportunity to do so. We did do that in the assessment phase. We had your plans. We looked through them and started to identify, well, where are there consistencies or inconsistencies? And we have some of that process documented. And we've done it again and looking through that as well. So there are consistencies and inconsistencies in our respective plans at this point. I think we've been focused a little more on the wilderness designation, or the wilderness, not designation, but the recommendations in this EIS. And that's probably something we can spend some more time with. We've had some great information, very substantive information from the producers that are affected by at least 4 of those allotments there on that west side of the Sacramento Ranger District. I mean, east side, sorry. So, you know, and then the other issue that I think comes up is what, when you have those inconsistencies in our respective plans, how do you go about resolving and reconciling those differences? And there's this very important part of that in the law that's, to the extent practicable, we do that. And certainly when we're going to run into some rubs is when there's inconsistencies in the federal enabling laws that gives us our marching orders, and if there's something inconsistent in the local plan that leads us in a different direction, then that's something that we're going to probably have to agree to disagree on in terms of reconciliation of those. So it doesn't require us to reconcile them, but it does require us to acknowledge them, recognize them, and try to resolve them. So I think that's the important part, and we're here in the spirit of that, try to resolve those.
So where in your plan, in the revised plan, does it identify that you looked at the Chaves County plan? Where is it mentioned in there? Or where in the draft environmental impact statement does it mention, does it show that, well, I can tell you this much. The forest plan that you have looks nothing like and incorporates none of the policies that Chaves County has. And Chaves County's policies have all been built to comply with federal law. So that's not an issue. But there's nothing in your plan that matches up or looks like, you know, it has the same philosophy, the same policies being advanced as the Chaves County plan. And there's also nothing in there that mentions that you've reviewed their plan or how you've identified those inconsistencies and how you were unable to resolve them. NEPA requires that all that information be in the analysis. And if you had done all that and you found inconsistencies, then you're also, as a part of the coordination process, should be coming to the county and saying, hey, look, we're looking at doing this plan. Here are things that we've taken a look at your plan. These are in conflict. I don't know how we're going to get together on this, but let's have that conversation. And that never happened. So so that didn't take place, and that is your responsibility. It doesn't show up in the plan, and it's not in the draft environmental impact statement. So those are some of the flaws in the process that it's a real problem as far as advancing the environmental impact statement as to whether or not it's sufficient, because those things should be in there.
So it wouldn't be found in the forest plan itself. There may be some minor discussion, but in the EIS, that will be included as an appendices to demonstrate where those consistencies and inconsistencies are. And I don't know, we don't have that in the appendices in the draft, correct? So, yeah. So that's how it's will be addressed through that NEPA process, and through that analysis will be displayed in there, and then any other ongoing activities and interaction that we have with counties relative to reconciliation of those differences.
So that's going to come out in the final analysis, which is the end of the process. And the National Forest Management Act requires that be done at the beginning of the process. So before the draft analysis, environmental impact statement went out to the public for them to comment on this, it should have had the position of the county should have been stated in there so that the public and decision makers can consider that when they're making their comments. So I mean, it's nice that you're doing it now, but it should have been done at the beginning of the process where it could have influenced the actual outcome of the alternatives. Putting it in at the end doesn't do anything but check off a box.
It was in the assessment as well.
Where in the
Discussion
assessment?
of that.
There's a chapter, it might be chapter something, in the socioeconomic analysis.
And it talks about the
Where
plan?
different county plans were looked at.
And it talks about the inconsistencies?
I don't know, but that also went out for public comment also.
Okay, so again, they're not the public.
Any opportunities to participate.
They're not the public. And if you found inconsistencies, how come you didn't come ask them about it? How come you didn't work with them to try and resolve those inconsistencies?
Don't have a good answer for that. I mean, we looked at that. We identified plenty of opportunities. We presented with some, others mostly at their solicitation, come talk to us about your forest plan kind of things. So, this is a matter, in many ways you're arguing matters of law here, and I'm not going to sit here and try to explain how we implemented those. I think we have followed those. We did consider that. Could we have done better? Could we have engaged more often, more consistently? Sure. Could the county have come to us with these inconsistencies as well? Yes, they could have.
Well, the county couldn't have come to you with the inconsistencies until they'd seen your plan, and they were not given a copy of the plan.
Right.
So they couldn't do it until you went out with the
And
public comments.
we didn't have our plan either at the assessment phase when we started looking at where are these things, what are your plans saying as we're starting to develop ours. And those are used as kind of background documentation, what's going on in the counties, where's the thrust of their goals and their emphasis, their vision. All of that influences.
Can I give you a practical situation? In reading through your material, you held some public meetings for the public to help you define what is substantially unnoticeable. And pictures were put up. I'm just reading this out of your documents. Pictures were put up, and the public who attended was asked which pictures seem substantially unnoticeable and what characteristics make substantially unnoticeable. The reasoning in your documents is that for an area to be considered wilderness or a wilderness study area, it has to meet the definition of the Wilderness Act. That's for what's wilderness. And that uses the term substantially unnoticeable, which your documents say was not defined. Therefore, you went to the public in order to get their input as to what would be defined. And then you went forward with that definition in order to determine which areas were wilderness study areas and wilderness areas in the Lincoln National Forest. Now, one of the issues that we have is you went through the Chaves County plan, correct? And you had done that by the time you did this assessment? Do you remember if you had done that before you had those public meetings on trying to come up with that definition?
Well, in the assessment phase, in the early 2015, I remember that, was when those were looked at, yeah. I mean,
So they've had, the Chaves County plan has criteria for what can be considered wilderness.
okay.
Okay. So instead of going to the public and showing them pictures, why not coordinate with the county? Since you'd looked at their plan and they had that definition, why not come to them and say, hey, we have a different, direction that we want to go on this. How do we get together on this? How do we resolve the conflict? Those are some of the decisions, if you had coordinated with them early on, at the beginning of the process, you very likely would have come up with a different, first off, you would have had the benefit of their expertise to help define that going forward, which could have completely changed the end result and all of the WSAs that are now being advanced. So that's a practical reason why, you're saying that yes, you've had these public meetings, but the actual coordination that's required has not taken place. And there were many opportunities where you could have done that and should have done that.
Okay. We agree that we could have done it differently. And here we're today, and we're in our process, and we're going to advance that and understand what are those substantive things that are of concern.
So Travis, just real quick, I heard you say that you guys started this process in 2015, and that was my first year as a county commissioner, and I know we have former Commissioner Chesser sitting over on the sidelines and former Commissioner Korn, and I don't know, maybe I just missed it. It wasn't out there, Commissioner Chesser. You guys are highly involved with this, and I've tried to do my best to follow in your all's footsteps to do this, but then suddenly we come up with this deal 6 months ago that it's already a plan, and we haven't been a part of this really at all. Up until today, this is really the first time that we are having this type of open meeting with you guys to have this conversation. I was just out in Washington, D.C. for our NACO conference out there, and one of the last meetings I was in, we had someone from the Interior Department and someone from the USDA Department. And of course, one of our biggest concerns that we have right now out west is the 30 by 30 plan. And so that was part of our conversation with these folks. And I had a commissioner from Washington State that was really, getting on to them. And they said, just trust us. Just trust us. It's all going to be okay. And so, but at this particular stage where we're at right now, we're having a real hard time with just trusting what's going on here because it really looks like we're supposed to just stick our heads in the sand and just, whether it's the BLM or whether it's Forest Service, wherever, you guys know it, and you just want us to go ahead and go with it without coordinating with you. And that's the coordination part of this, and I've fought this with Commissioner Korn and with Commissioner Chesser for my 7 years and 3 months on this county commission in all of our meetings in Washington, D.C., that we're not being coordinated with as a county, as a local government. And I can dang sure guarantee you guys, all of the federal agencies, all the state agencies, they are showing up at the reservations with the tribes, and they are sitting down with them to coordinate and do the things that you guys are wanting to do right here, right now. And we should be treated the same way as county, local government. And I trust you guys, I really do. I hope this works out in the best interest of all the people sitting in this room and all of the citizens of Eddy, Otero, Lincoln, and Chaves County. But this is a meeting right now that's extremely important to a lot of the folks in this audience, And I hope that it gets us to where we need to be to protect our constituents of these 4 counties. So I really appreciate you guys being here, but I'm not sure if you have a response to that or,
Other than to say that I value that as well. I mean, at the end of the day, we serve the public, the American public. It is a national resource. But I also recognize that at the end of the day as well is the effects are local, right? It's a huge asset to our local economies. The natural resources and the ecological amenities that derive from the national forest, whether it be water or scenery that brings visitors to our communities to spend money and enjoy the natural world out there. So, yeah, I agree. It's very important.
well, I hope by the time we finish with this process that we earn your trust and that you guys earn our trust when it's all said and done. I hope that would be the case. So,
Mr. Chairman, Kim, would you comment on your tenure on this? Do you have any thoughts on it?
Need to go to the microphone.
My name is Kim Chesser, 399 Chesser Road, which I had the opportunity to serve on this commission for 8 years, and I was very involved in more so with the process of the RMP for the Carlsbad district. And you asked a question a while ago, is when I was still a commissioner here in 2015, of whether I was aware of this plan with the Forest Service, and honestly, I do not remember. I mean, I could have gotten an email on it, but I don't remember the particulars. But never was, to my knowledge, was the Forest Service directly in contact with our county manager and the county commission at that time of saying, we're going to start this process and we want you to be involved with us. Because that's something that I would remember. I mean, and truthfully, I could have gotten an email that said something, but I don't remember that at all. And I know that if the coordination process is handled, if it's handled right, where everybody can sit down at the table at the same time at the very start and be able to hear the views of the Forest Service as well as the county, even before this goes out for public comment. I mean, when you do it the way that it's supposed to be done, it makes a lot of difference because of the fact everybody feels like they have some say. Whether you're getting to put your part in the stew, and this process is a lot like making a stew. I mean, everybody comes up here and you put in your part, and then after you've had the opportunity to put your part in, then you can step back. And this plan is not necessarily just the Forest Service, it's not the county, it's not the public, but yet everybody has had a part in making this stew. And then, but if you've had a part, you can step away from it. And that's what I see now, is the frustration of Chaves County, along with Otero and Eddy and Lincoln, that they haven't had an opportunity to, at least in their eyes, to put their part in the stew. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Zell.
what we're missing here is that the Forest Management Act and FLIPMA do not put the burden on local governments to go to the federal agency and beg to be allowed to be a cooperating agency or a coordinating local government. It is the exact opposite. The federal laws require their employees to coordinate with state and local government. And I've got Flipma right here. I can read it to you if you want. But the burden is on the agency, whether it be the Forest Service, the BLM, or Fish and Wildlife. The burden is on them in order for them to comply. Travis, you started to say, I think a while ago, that I'm not a lawyer when you were debating with Margaret. Well, I am. So when you read the federal law, it says, agency, these are the steps you do. And those are the steps that weren't taken. And that is the root cause of local government frustration. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Zell. Anybody else? You have one more thing.
I have a question that I've been asking of the BLM for a decade now, and I haven't gotten an answer. I'll bounce it off the Forest Service. Under FLIPMA, which is what, 45 years old, federal agencies were required to inventory federal lands and note those that had wilderness-like characteristics, right? Okay, so those inventories have been going on, assumably, for 45 plus years. Has the definition or the criteria of wilderness-like characteristics changed in that period of time to the point that something that did not have wilderness-like characteristics in 1990 all of a sudden have them now?
No, the Wilderness Act defines those wilderness characteristics, and those haven't changed.
Then how can there ever be a proposal for new wilderness? It was all over the Carlsbad RMP.
So it's the evaluation of something like solitude, which is in the Wilderness Act, right? I should stand up and might pardon me for.
People are on the line listening, so we want to be sure it's important.
So, you know, what I know is that our 2012 rule directs us to evaluate all the national forest lands for wilderness values. And that's the implementation that we're doing now is making those determinations and evaluation. And it's not a yes and no answer. It's really a continuum, and even our evaluation, we rank them in terms of, from low to high, very high propensity towards meeting those values. And that's how we use those in recommending just different numbers or different acreages of wilderness. But the Wilderness Act in and of itself hasn't changed. It's really just look at your landscape and evaluate it based on this process that is pretty much prescribed to us.
That's the way I read it too.
All right.
In any of your 5 alternatives, are there any private land in holdings? Okay.
I'd have to look at the map.
She said yes, but they all have access, she thinks.
My recollection, I'm trying to visualize the map. There's certainly some adjacent, certainly abutting what was recommended. But I do not recall in holdings in that.
I believe there are in-holdings, but my memory is that they have access.
Do any of those in-holdings currently have Forest Service grazing permits?
The in-holdings, I don't know. Why, if it's an in-holding, it wouldn't, are you talking its base property? I don't know.
I would
Because with
suspect that
wilderness
some of them might.
designation, wouldn't the grazing permits go away?
No.
No?
It's an allowable use in the law, in the Wilderness Act, grazing.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Zell. I thought you had something else that you were coming with, because I know how he does that, so it's the attorney in him. Travis, thank you, guys. What I'd like to do at this point in time is have some of our ranchers in these different areas come up and give some presentations on how this will affect their property and grazing and all the other things that may be of detriment to them. So if I can, let me start with Stetson Elkins. I don't know if you and your dad both want to come up, or you and Alden?
Alden. is
Alden,
my dad.
excuse me.
Yes. I guess I'm going to speak for some of these guys. The presentation we're going to give is through Alternative B, the lands affected.
So Stetson, let me get you to stop real quick. If you can, I know you're a big guy, tall.
Yes.
You could pull that microphone over maybe a little bit closer to you,
Okay.
or
I'll step
talk
up
more into it.
closer
So,
to- Okay.
all right, thank you.
Like I said, my dad, he is affected in this. I also ranch and have an allotment that would be affected in Alternative C, but what we're going to give a presentation on is Alternative B. And that's what we brought to Travis and Diane. And I want to thank them. They've been very good this whole time and receptive. When we found out through Diane coming, to the cattle grazers, Otero County cattle grazers, she brought this up, and so we went to work showing infrastructure that each one of these allotments have that has been there, and that we just wanted to show we don't think it fits lands with wilderness characteristics. And anyways, that's what the purpose of this presentation will be. The allotments that are affected here, the first one will be the Dog Canyon allotment owned by Mr. Joe Ade, and then the Cuevo Canyon allotment, Alden Elk, Mule Canyon allotment, Cooper Brothers Ranch, Antelope Canyon allotment owned by Bonnie Smith, Katy allotment owned by Jim Ellett, and the Avis allotment owned by Ken Katy. The purpose of this presentation is just to show these things that are out there on those ranches, on those allotments that have been put in. They've been around for a long time, a lot of them. But anyways, we'll go through them now. So the first one we'll start with is the Dog Canyon allotment. It's found within these SRDs, which is inside the glossary of their forest revision plan. Go ahead there. This is Mr. Ade's allotment, the Dog Canyon. The orange is the boundary there. The red, it represents all the roads that are found within, and blue represents pipelines that kind of run throughout. We'll go through some examples of a little bit more. Here's road there with pipeline running along. A lot of these pictures were taken last fall. There's a lot of, we finally had a little rain, so we grew some grass. Things look a little different, but we were glad to have it. But move ahead there and just keep on kind of rolling through. Just some more examples of roads and pipelines that are within. Here's a county road that runs, that red line that's running right through the center. They're running above it. That runs right through the center of that wilderness, which they're parallel drains, is that what you call it? They're on either side. You said they meet on the county road, correct? Correct. So they meet on either side, she says. But to me, the county road is still running right through the center of their wilderness. That one is one of the most highly used county roads during hunting season. It's kind of like a highway when everybody's elk hunting, you know. So
We got it.
it's still there, is what even though there's a buffer on either side, to me, it's right through the center of the wilderness, proposed wilderness lands. Okay. This is another county road on the far other end of the allotment there. This is along that same, the first county road we showed, there is a fiber optic line that runs through also, PVT has. I'm sure that would be within the buffer too, but these are just examples of that line running through. Just wanted that brought up, you know, that there's even fiber, and I know PVT has concerns about that because I serve on their board and we've talked about it in our meetings, you know, of what they can do down the road to improve internet. That's a big deal right now. So
It's big nationwide.
right.
It's a big deal.
Now we'll show some water improvements that are located all throughout. There's dirt tanks, water troughs, storage tanks, all over throughout the allotment. We'll look at some examples. Right here's one well. Another one on the opposite end allotment. That electric line that's coming in there, it crosses the county road, and then that for a ways, that'll also be in the wilderness area. So I know, like Otero County Electric, they'll have electric line that would be within the lands with wilderness characteristics, you know, and so they have concerns also about maintaining their utilities. Here's examples of storage tanks. These are big, great big storage tanks, 30 foot tall, you know, have been there since before my time. It's another example of storage tank, pipeline. Some dirt tanks, and all these dirt tanks, you know, they require a little maintenance. They'll silt in and won't be, and we've got some pictures of some of those, you know, that are not neat and cleaned out, but we have to have the large wheeled equipment in order to maintain a lot of that stuff, you know, to keep our country working good. So these are all just pictures, and there's a picture of something we might need to use, you know, to maintain those dirt tanks and a lot of pipelines and stuff. So. Example more of the drinkers around. We just tried to put together quite a bit what's out there, you know, on the land, just to show. This one here is kind of a little different. On Mr. A.D.'s allotment, there's a old test well that they drilled in the 70s, Yates Petroleum did. They were exploring, I guess, see if they find any oil or gas up there. But anyways, that casing there is still there, and there's a road that runs to it. It's all grassed over, but you can see, we've got some pictures of it, but it's a raised roadbed and had gravel hauled in, on it. It's pretty hard over right now, but anyways, that's been around for a long, long time. Just more examples of that casing there. This one is my dad's allotment, the Cueva Canyon allotment. I'll show you some examples on his also. Just an outline of the affected area. It's the same thing, the roads and the pipelines that are in that area. Picture of the roads. Just some more examples. So this is that same county road that was running through Mr. A-Day's permit. It runs on through my dad's there, and that's just a picture of it. Another example of a county road that runs through. Also the fiber optic line that ran through his permit also runs right down the canyon through my dad's too. So example of drinkers and storage tanks that are found all throughout the land there that they're proposing. Some dirt tanks. I think this one here is one. See, this one that's silted in needs maintenance, and we need to be able to take care of those dirt tanks, because not only they help us, they help all the wildlife big time. So my dad's also has a test well site. His has this fenced in enclosed area. That's part of the road, the culvert there where they put in and coming in. You can see that's some of that chip seal gravel that was hauled in back in the 70s. Just a close picture there. The culvert that was put in on that road. I'm gonna let Mr. Punk Cooper explain a little more on their allotment. He's got a better grasp.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman.
Thank you.
I do want to thank the county commissioners from the various counties, particularly Lincoln County. Very glad to see you here. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and neighbors and friends that are all here. I'm a part of a family that's been in New Mexico for quite a while. I'm the fourth generation, and there are generations now behind me, all in this same family operation called Cooper Brothers Livestock. And a large part of what we operate on is a combination of Bureau of Land Management lands and Forest Service lands in 3 counties, in Chaves, Otero, and Lincoln counties. So anything that we talk about right now that would be of an adverse effect to our operation wouldn't just affect one operation, it'll affect all 3 counties from the standpoint of our operations contribution to those counties in the way of tax base and so on. So, and I imagine that's pretty much the same with all of them. This particular allotment is called Mule Canyon allotment. The, what do they call it, alternative B part of it is only about close to half the allotment, and the other half is in alternative C, of course. And so, and it has a county road, 2.5 miles of it running right up the side of it. You see the roads there in red and the pipelines in blue, and you can see that a lot of the pipelines and roads extend outside of what would be the forest boundary. That's because the water service for them, the well or the pumping systems, are outside of the forest. Within the forest, there are 2 well locations on ours. Let's see, let's go to some of the pictures here. These are all items, some of them have been there a very long time. Most of them were not put in by the Forest Service. They were put in with private money going back to before 60 years ago, some of it that was put in by the original allotment holder on this particular allotment. There are roads through that area, most of them what you'd call a 2-rut road, similar to that one right there. There are roads that are necessary for maintaining the pipelines and the tanks and the waterings and the 2 wells, and essential part of what we do. That's the county road that runs right down the side of it. There is 2.5 miles of that, and that is maybe the heaviest camp torn area. I know the game department for several years said that they had 80 some odd camps, averaging 5 people per camp along that 2.5 mile stretch. A little more dense than the population in Alamogordo that weekend. That there will still be camps, by the way, along that road. They'll just have to be on one side of it, I suppose. The forest designated the other side as a wilderness. This is what a road looks like if it's not maintained, which oftentimes in the forest is the case. This was one built by our hunting population. This was the first area, I believe, in the Lincoln National Forest that was designated with road closure. We went along with it. It was a part of the management plan. Ours was one of the first management plans in the Lincoln, and it was a necessary thing at the time. It was closed theoretically to public access, but from day one, the Forest Service spent a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of people, and never did ever keep the public from utilizing those areas when they want to. The hunting population in that area is pretty heavy, and the ability to enforce a closure there, completely enforce a closure, was impossible, and is to this day. You'll see that all the adjacent area to that, by the way, is private land. And the private lands, we keep the gates locked and so on, and try to keep the public from accessing that part of the forest in vehicles. But they have plenty of access on foot. It's a lot of it, it's been subject to flooding tremendously the last few years. That's a bunch of our surface pipe that was not buried, and there it is, wadded up and shoved down by a tree. That is on the forest. They talked about things that are not above the horizon line. Well, this is one of the wells and towers that definitely above the horizon. That's the Mule Canyon Ridge well, and it's so visible from anywhere around there that the hunters actually use it as a landmark, and they'll talk about, well, I went over just south of this windmill tower, and they tell you right where it is, and of course you know when they describe it what they're using as their landmark. That is a trick tank, surface collection water tank on the forest. It's been there for over 40 years. Most of these things have been, and some of these things are brand new, like the poly tank you see sitting there, and in a lot of these items, and I don't know, I think Stetson pointed it out, but many of these items were put in there with EQIP contracts. In an EQIP contract, you are contracting to maintain it for 20 years. Now, I know that on some of these other allotments, the contracts are ongoing. They haven't finished them yet. Ours are all finished, but there's still the requirement to maintain it for 20 years. Maintain not only the item, but the use of the item. So in the case of about maybe 3 miles of pipeline there, and 4 storages and 6 drinkers, and these are all items that are on the management plan map with the Forest Service. Okay, and that particular set of pipeline there in blue, that was put in with an EQIP project and is, in order to maintain it, that well that feeds it must be maintained. Getting to that well is a whale of a road, let me tell you. You have to get a big enough vehicle in there to pull basically 1,000-foot of well pipe to the surface in order to maintain it. You can't do that horseback. You can't do that with a four-wheeler or Polaris. You're going to have a big truck. And those kind of things are what concerns us, because to lose that ability, you lose the efficiency of the operation. This particular allotment is a pivotal part of our operation. It isn't like it's some fringe thing that we just do for a hobby. It's critical to the operation of the rest of that ranch. That and the other 4 ranch locations operate together as one business. So when you damage one part of it by making it less efficient, you're reducing the efficiency of all the rest. There are also some items like that right there that are pretty good indicators that human activity's been out there for a long time, a lot more than 45 years. That's an old well. I mean, not a well, that's a mine, an old mine shaft. There's mine tailings off down from it. You can't see them real well there, but it's a pretty good little field of rocks and tailings that, I believe back in the 20s, there's some more of it, was put in there. So human activity has been out there for a long, long time. It's not like this is stuff that's new. And like it's been pointed out, the Wilderness Act has not changed in 45 years. And the terrain in the area hasn't either. I thank you guys for your time. Got any questions?
Thank you.
Commissioners, any questions for Punk? Mr. Cooper?
Thank you.
I do have a couple of ranchers from Eddy County that would like to speak.
Okay.
I must apologize, I didn't get them set up to bring the PowerPoint. I think they've got one with them, but Tony Lewis and Janet Cox, would either one of you care to at least speak?
Well, we've got a couple more, Commissioner, and then we'll work to the Eddie.
I thought you were in.
Can I make one comment? I'm Joe Aday. I'm the owner of the Dog Canyon allotment that Stetson was so gracious to discuss. You saw the earlier pictures, and part of what was important to me is that all that infrastructure was put in with heavy equipment. We used dozers, backhoes, skid steers, obviously trailers and trucks to get it in there, and a lot of that water line is buried 3 foot deep. It's fed by 3 primary wells. It's actually hooked up to 6 wells to keep it wet, and that particular area has no natural water. Those tanks that exist there were made to catch water, and they obviously have to be cleaned out. But that if it springs a leak, we have to go in there with heavy equipment to dig it up and fix it. And so I was told by one of the people that work with my allotment from the Forest Service that if this becomes a wilderness study area or a wilderness itself, that I won't be able to go in there except with hand tools. It's impossible. That whole system will go down. And it was put in with a lot of NRCS money, equip money. I think the contract was over $300,000, and it took us 5.5 years to do it. So we're concerned it will be the demise of the ranch if that allotment goes down. There's about 7,000 acres there that are a big part and well situated to run cattle and to maintain the water systems that not only are for it, but they cross it and go to other parts of the ranch. So if I can answer a question, I will, but I just wanted to mention that.
Any questions from Mr. Adair?
Just, can you clarify on an equip contract, if you can't continue to maintain that, do you have to pay that money back?
Well, there's a penalty. I don't know exactly what it is.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Anybody else? Thank you, Mr. Adair. Gary Stone. Okay.
I'm Jim Elliott. The ranch is J.B. Runyon Incorporated. We've had that allotment for 97 years now. In 1973, they built a fence across it to keep us off of it, as on and off before we could use it any time. But they built the fence across it. It cost more to build the fence than what the land was worth at the time. And can you go to reminding us of the last one? Katie. That's it. What you got with the pictures? But I have no improvements on it. It's one ridge, 2 miles long and a half a mile wide. They asked Punk to take it over several years ago, in 1973. He wasn't interested in it because nothing can get there from his side. They have to come from my side. I've got waters on 2 different canyons coming into it. You know, it's no use to anybody. This is probably the only one that really qualifies. But I don't want to lose it, you know. I think there's something like culture in that after 97 years. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
So Gary Stone, there's Gary back there hiding.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, thank you for having me today. I am Gary Stone. I'm president of the Otero County Cattlemen's Association and a member of the Otero County Grazing Advisory Board, a 4th-generation rancher. Both sides of my family homesteaded on the Miller Flats and McDonald Flats area. We did submit comments to the draft forest plan and the EIS, and specifically we're here to talk about the wilderness characteristics. And if I may, I'm going to read, because it's been a while, I'm going to read some of the comments. The Act of June 4th, 1897 was an act making appropriation for sundry civil expenses of the government in the fiscal year ending June 13th. The reservations are for non-wilderness purposes. Okay, the Act of June 4th, 1897, surveying the public land states, no public forest reservation shall be established except to improve forest reservations, conditions of water flows, and to furnish a continuous supply of timber for the use and necessity of the citizens of the United States. This law specifically states that uses for the forest lands were set aside. They were to be used for the economic and personal benefits of the citizens of the United States by utilizing the resources. The creation of forest reserves were never intended to be closed from the use of the resources. The Forest Service did not have the legal authority to manage any of the forest lands as wilderness areas when they have not been congressionally designated as a wilderness. Wilderness areas in a direct conflict with the multiple uses of the Forest Service. I like your question about what makes it a wilderness now. I think it's agenda. The wilderness characteristic, my passion is for the livestock industry and for the hard-working middle-class rancher, that the culture and the heritage and all of that, the livestock industry itself, that's where my passion is. And I think it's agenda. I think the wilderness characteristic is just another piece of a huge agenda and a land grab that's put together and driven by environmentalists and special interest groups. The 30/30 plan being one of those. ESA, which is the Endangered Species Act, is chopping more heads off than anything else. We all saw what the spotted owl did to the economic stability of the communities, to hard-working class loggers. devastating. Now I think that we see the same attack coming on the livestock industry, which is all we have left. You know, through the Endangered Species Act, we had the spotted owl. Now we've got the New Mexico meadow jumping mouth. They got 170 or 80 of these things they can pull out of the drawer anytime they want to. Anywhere from a yellow-billed cuckoo bird, whatever that is,
You left the chipmunk out.
to
Chipmunk.
to,
Yeah.
to any other thing. We just had one of the largest in the region allotment owners get his head chopped off a couple of weeks ago. He went from 550 to they authorized 103 head on him. He's done. He's out of there. It's over. So I think the wilderness characteristics is just part of an agenda-driven land grab. And I thank the commission for getting together. I thank the commission for listening to us. We need to preserve the livestock industry if we can, because there is a direct attack on it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Stone, thank you, and I would agree with you on the attack on our ranchers and farmers, and that's an unfortunate deal. And I'm not saying that to you guys, but out in the West, that's what's happening. So I appreciate you making those statements. So, and I have to apologize. I missed Lauren Patterson, who is the president of the New Mexico Cattle Growers. I don't know if you have any comments that you want to make, but I apologize for missing you at the front end of this deal and recognizing you for being here.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the commissions. I appreciate being able to address you today. I'm lucky to represent many of the people in this building on your board as well. So I get to wear two hats up here today. I'm an allotment owner in the Lincoln Forest in the Smoky Bear District, and I am directly affected by this. I'll have about 6,000 acres of proposed wilderness on me. It affects 3 separate pipelines on me, 15 drinkers, 5 dirt tanks, 2 storage tanks. No wells. Luckily, all my wells are on private property, and so I'll still have the base property and the water. But I can tell you that my 4 biggest expenses as a rancher are the land, supplemental feed, fuel, and labor. So land and fuel and labor will all be affected on that when they make those designations. Now, I don't blame anybody in this room for these designations that are proposed. I do believe that these are coming from a higher source in our government, and I do appreciate that our local governments and our county governments are being involved, because right now you guys are our only line of defense. One last thing I'll say, we're constantly feeling that pressure. When they make these wilderness declarations, we're already a tinderbox. How is it going to affect their ability to fight these wildfires that we're going to see? I mean, we just saw in Texas what a fast-moving wildfire can do. That's our assets out there grazing around. That's twice I've made it to 800 head of my own cows with my own brand, and twice I've had to sell down to 200 head in my 40 years of ranching here in New Mexico. So luckily I'm building back up. I'm ever optimistic, but that's what we have to be in this industry. So I appreciate Margaret being here. We have to fight this thing together, and I sure hope you guys take a look behind me. A lot of good people here trying to tell you the truth. One last thing I'll say, we just filed a lawsuit yesterday against the U.S. Forest Service as New Mexico Cattle Growers in regards to 65 head of cattle that were killed in the Gila National Wilderness. Obviously, we don't want that to be an example of how to deal with stray cattle in the state of New Mexico. That's not what we want as an industry. That's not what we want as producers. That's not what we want as New Mexicans. We filed that largely because they took managers off that wilderness. Those grazing allotments were taken over by the Forest Service, and managers left. Not ranchers, but land managers. And so the same thing can happen, obviously, in our Lincoln National Forest, and we sure won't fight that. So thank you for your time, and feel free to call, and I'll bend your ear some more if you want to listen. So thank you.
Commissioners, any questions for Warren? Go ahead,
I would
Commissioner.
just say that I don't have anything against anybody in this room. I very much agree that this probably came from DC. I don't think it started here. I've been around long enough. I remember Bruce Babbitt and Bill Clinton and Cattle Free in '93. This is along the same lines. That all kind of went away under the Bush administration. Obama comes along and we started getting the WOTUS, and the fight all started over again. Well, the first question I asked was, what's the impetus behind this? Back to 2015 and a lot. It seems to me that it's not a coincidence that none of this was going on during the Trump administration, and a year and a half into the Biden administration. Can I say, Brandon? Here we go again. So.
One final comment, if you don't mind. In dealing with my grazing allotment over the last 2 years, the Forest Service office has not been open. We have not been able to gather in meeting rooms like this and discuss these things. We have been mandated to silence in a lot of respects. And I sure hope we can maybe reopen some of the public comment and some of that stuff as we go forward, because in some regards I feel like we were silenced as an association, as an industry, and as a rancher. Thank you.
You guys don't go anywhere, because 16-ounce ribeye is always right on my plate, so I really appreciate the Mexico cattle growers. So, Bill, do you have some slides that you want to show real quick?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Alfredo's going to pull up just 4 slides real quick, just to kind of give you guys kind of a frame of reference. Why everyone here said, we don't consider this a personal attack by you guys, but we do feel like there's a big picture going on here. Everyone has mentioned it with conservation stuff. So anyway, I'm just going to talk quickly about these 4 slides, and everyone can kind of build off of that. We asked for a slide the other day with the wilderness areas, the potential for the 402,000 acres of wilderness area. We found lots of neat layers and stuff, but unfortunately I didn't find that, so I copied this out of the Alternative C and imposed it upon a GIS map. So the purple areas, the hashtag areas, are the potentially proposed 402,000 acres of wilderness areas within the Lincoln National Forest. Give me the next slide. Now this next slide, we've been working for several years with the Bureau of Land Management, the Carlsbad Resource Management Plan. You can see where it says New Mexico, that's the Chaves County Boot Heel boundary there. So from there down south through Eddy County and Chaves County is what is going to be part of the Carlsbad Resource Management Plan. It does not show any additional. If they ever get the Carlsbad Resource Management Plan done, then they'll work on the Roswell Resource Management Plan, then which will take us further north and start to probably connect some areas. But what's interesting is these are lands with wilderness characteristics, and they're all adjacent to all these places. If you'll click it one more time. There's a couple more just showed up right there at the edge of the boot heel there. Those were additional lands with wilderness characteristics, and the question's been asked, all these lands were inventoried in 1978, and they weren't deemed to be wilderness areas at that time, and of course 50 years of hopefully progress, even in New Mexico, even in the boot heel of New Mexico, and even in Eddy County, we don't hardly see how those lands could become more pristine if they didn't meet the requirements in 1978. By the time you add, we've seen places out in the boot heel, there's satellite dishes over there. There's a community water supply, not just a pipeline going to a feeder or to a water. There's gas lines, there's all kinds of infrastructure out throughout some of these areas that are proposed. Now if you click the next slide, when you add that other pink area, that's the areas of critical environmental concern for the grassland predators. And the next step of areas of critical environmental concern is, we probably need to manage those different. Well, there's a lot of ranch land out through those, a lot of other allotments. So you can kind of start to see how we're starting to get concerned. Chaves County is already 60% government-owned between the BLM, or between the government agents, the federal government and the state government. We're 60%. So that only leaves 40% for our tax base. All the government stuff's paid for by payment in lieu of taxes, which is a negotiated thing. They don't give us a full amount that the lands are worth. And, you know, we can't build roads, we can't build hospitals, can't build schools if we don't get some kind of credit for that. And then you add the secure rural schools, which you Forest Service people, of course, know a lot more about that than I do. There's only this much forest in Chaves County, but that's not always funded. And if it's not funded, you know, there's huge amounts of forest in the United States. And of course, if it's not funded, it doesn't affect Chaves County very much. I think we only get $24,000 a year on secure rural schools.
Well, Bill, real quick, the problem with that is if secure rural schools doesn't get funded, then we go from having $3.5 million in built money
Right.
to probably about 2.1 million.
Right. And that's the thing. They start taking then money from the PILT to make everyone whole across the nation for all the forests that didn't get funded. So that's a broken system. We continue to add more and more lands to the federal. Like I say, we've got 60% of the land in Chaves County already belongs to the government. And 36 of that, I believe, is federal government. And then along comes the 30 by 30. We want 30% of the nation's lands and waters by the year 2030. And in fact, the real goal is 50% of the lands and waters in the world to save us all from global warming, whatever.
Climate change, you got to be politically correct.
And you know, my personal opinion on that is, you know, the God that I worship didn't wake up in the 20th century and say, man, I never thought about global warming. I never thought about the Industrial Revolution. What am I going to do? I think he knew, he planned, he knows, and I think we're pretty foolish to think that we can change something like that if it's even going on. But again, I believe it has a lot more to do with administrations than it does to do with actual need for those types of things. One last slide. So if you kind of pan out, this is a USGS slide. Most of the green areas are Forest Service within the state. It does show the Mescalero looks a little green, and some of the brown areas are reservations that kind of look green. But you can see there's a significant portion of New Mexico that's Forest Service. Doesn't show other lands, BLM lands, that kind of thing. But if these corridors, you can see just Chaves and Eddy County are involved in the Carlsbad Resource Management Plan. You put all that red area up against your green area and your other purple area that we had up there a second ago, and then you continue to connect all these places. I just don't see that there's a whole lot of land left for us to manage our local governments to do the things that we need to do. So anyway, that's kind of where we're coming from. And, you know, again, we thank you guys all for coming. We certainly thank everyone from the public for coming. And we certainly thank this honorable board of people that have come forward to help us kind of get our word out. But anyway, that's the only slide that I put together. I just wanted to be sure we got a chance to.
Thanks, Bill. Commissioner Beard, did you have some of your ranchers that wanted to speak?
I do. Right here, Tony Lewis. Appreciate y'all all being here. I'm from down in the Guadalupe Ranger District. Pretty much most of my place is being designated as one of the wilderness areas. It's area GRD 81. And I have the McCollum allotment. I'm the only person whose name is on the ranch deeds and the lease, but it's a family operation. There's 4 generations. Used to be 5, but my dad passed. And we all work on it. I'm going to talk about why I think it's inappropriate due to all the infrastructure that's there. I looked over your plan. I saw what you had. I think that you missed out on a lot of the infrastructure. That particular 81 there has 8,000 acres, 12 sections. So out of that 12 sections, going across there right now, don't hold me to within 5% on this, but it's probably 14 and a half miles of water pipeline. There's 9 water tanks, all their associated drinkers, Some of them are concrete and steel. One of them's a big steel rail car, sits on top of a mountain. There's the Cottonwood Well Watering Complex, and that's part of it, and it's 650-foot plus solar well, all installed at my expense. Okay, in coordination with the Forest Service, I cleared everything. There's, it's got 2 solar boosters on it that feed 4 other tanks, and we're in rough country. I guess we climbed 2,400 feet with those, and that's some pretty expensive infrastructure. Forest Service provided some of the materials for those, but the reality is the real cost is in the labor. It'd be hard for me to put a price on the labor, although my grandkids would say it's in strained backs and blisters and everything else. So this is a family thing. There's a big old dirt tank in the middle of it. There's this Telephone Ridge, Cave Ridge, Guadalupe Ridge, and Wild Cow Mesa Water Complex. Goes across there and into the wilderness study area that's on the border of it. We use that all the time. There's also 27 miles of fence line that's surrounding and bisecting this area. There's a lot of locations. There's livestock pens at the Munson and Taylor tanks. Okay. There's 8 roads that we counted running through there, surrounding it, going through it. 21 miles of it. In your own description of that area, you guys mentioned that it was lightly used. Well, I don't know how you define lightly used. The fact is it's heavily used during hunting season. It's heavily used by cavers. It's mostly, lately, heavily used by recreational sightseers. They're out there running around. I don't know, maybe y'all only count cars and trucks, but usually they're in ATVs and they're in UTVs. And we had all these corona birds that were running around there during all the time of the shutdown, and they were all over the place, and a lot of them have stayed. Some of the people that were going there now, though, there's been a big demographic change. There's a lot of older people. And they get out there. The only way that these people are going to see that area, I mean, I'm here for my personal reasons because this is going to affect my allotment a lot. But it's also going to affect an awful lot of people whose only access to those areas is if they can use those ATVs and UTVs to get out there. The only way they're going to be able to see the cliffs along Cottonwood Canyon and how beautiful that is and see the maples change is if they can go in an ATV and a UTV out there. So this isn't just about ranching and how it affects things. And those people come from all over the United States. And they're mostly out of Texas and New Mexico. But we stop and visit with them. A lot of times we help them out when they get broke down, give them water when they don't, take care of themselves well enough. And the roads, there's also a notation in your description that those roads are in real rough shape and primitive. Well, Guadalupe Ranger District is kind of a stepchild of the Lincoln National Forest, and they don't get a lot of funding for taking care of roads. So not intentional, but basically they've been going through kind of a demolition by neglect, by not being worked on. Probably that's a budget problem. I don't know. Something else about that water system is, as one of the other gentlemen said, it was installed and was maintained for cattle, but the reality is it's a primary source for wildlife over most of that area. It is also put down on maps where there's a lot of hiking paths and hiking trails that go through there. And that's where people stop, use their little life straws and everything. That's where they get their water. A lot of times up there is no water unless it's there. That water it's expensive to put in. It's expensive to maintain. And it is an actual part of the ecosystem up there. There's a lot of livestock, not just hunting animals, game animals. One other thing, I don't know how this affects anything, but that area is there's very firmly implanted exotic species of Barbary sheep that are all over that area, and they're hunted extensively. They don't get a lot of them because they're pretty wild, but they're there. And a lot of times they're there when you don't even know they're there. And I'm not sure that that got seen. Kind of like some of the other guys mentioned, is that there's, well, the way this, I got to ask you a question first. Is, as I read through the forest plan, I'm going to read you a quote. When you're first laying out everything, it said, motorized access should be allowed for administrative purposes on existing roads and trails, including for search and rescue operations, livestock management, state of New Mexico game and fish operations, and Lincoln National Forest Administration. So I assume this means that grazing allotment, is that still the case? And okay, and does that mean that grazing allotment owners are still going to be able to drive on those roads? They're shaking their heads yes for the people not in the room. Okay, and and we can, and all the ones that are currently in use that go to all that different infrastructure, would that be able to be there? That's one of my questions for you. So, assuming we have that right, and it does get designated wilderness, would we be able to, is that something that we'll have in writing? It'll transfer with the grazing allotment if by inheritance or sale?
So we end up, when we recommend those, and should that one of these alternatives be selected, we manage those recommended areas in a way so as not to further impair the values that they had at that time of recommendation, the wilderness values. So when you ask the question, can I guarantee that Congress, upon designation, won't restrict those kinds of uses? The current ESA grandfathers in livestock grazing inroads and access to them. The rule is non-motorized. The exception is use of motorized equipment to get back in there. So there's always going to be some uphill battle to use motorized vehicles. I'll just totally honest with you. It's designated, well, if it's designated, it would be designated for that purpose. So it's usually additional processes for getting approval to do those things. It's not saying that it's not allowed. It is allowed. It's just additional, processes to do that. So, and then Congress can act in any way, shape, or form that they so choose and designate, non-motorized altogether. So I can't guarantee you anything relative to an actual designation. What I can tell you is that while it's in that recommendation status, that we will continue to allow for those uses that are occurring out there.
So is this something that then would be under the control of, what was your title, be forest administrator? What would you be?
I'm the forest supervisor.
The forest supervisor, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Not dissing you.
No.
All right. So I guess the reason I read that and I started thinking about it, and I went and looked up the act, and I read some things in the act, and it didn't seem like you had that kind of a leeway. And so then I also thought, well, if you do have this leeway, what can it, how long would it be there? The day you left, would the next guy that comes in just say, no, and then all of a sudden we're out of luck? Because just like the rest of these guys, if the reason all that infrastructure was put in is to use the grazing in a way that is best for the forest. Probably like most of these folks, I try really hard to be a good steward for the grazing on my place, okay? And we try to keep it so that it looks beautiful and pristine. Looks like I might have been shooting myself in the foot by doing that now, but the fact is, it is beautiful when you go in there, and it is rugged, and we love it, and we love sharing it. And I think it's a shame that if this gets designated, that there's a whole lot of people that are never going to see it unless they happen to be a real able-bodied Sierra Club kind of guy, you know, I mean, that, or gal more these days, who's going to be wandering through and the kind of person that does triathlons every week. Instead of the people that seems to be the biggest demographic that I see up there visiting right now, which is people in their 50s and they're like me with 2 or 3 hip transplants and stuff like that. So, I don't know, this affects us economically, and it affects us in a lot of other ways. But if this designation goes through. So I guess my first point is, I think this is inappropriate because it's not exactly untrammeled by man. That area has been ranched for well over 100 years, and there's an awful lot of engravings on the side of the walls by different ranchers, and including some U.S. Forest Service engravings from the from 1904 and 1908 that I can show you pictures of. So I guess that's kind of my point. I do have one other thing. Is you talked a lot about the fact that you're giving a lot of people a chance to give their input to this. Well, I actually have worked pretty closely with the Forest Service down there prior to COVID especially, and I have a pretty good range command, and that I talked with and worked with a lot. Renee, she was always out there. She's out there on the place looking at things. She knows what's going on. And I've had other meetings with the Forest Service who's come up there because we've had a lot of problems with the Ponderosa up there and brought people in. And we were trying to see what was going on with that. I called them and asked them to come out and take a look, and y'all did. And that was good. I certainly don't see any reason why all the allotment owners, I don't belong to the Allotment Owners Association. I don't get out much. I'm kind of a social retard and I don't associate with groups. Not much of a joiner. But I think it wouldn't have taken much to use your mailing list and send something out. And the other thing is, you mentioned having meetings at all these counties, and I want to ask the question, did you have any meetings in Eddy County? And how were these announced? Is this like one of these little legal notices in the back of the paper that says I'm not responsible for somebody's debts or what?
So we tried to announce them through a variety of different methods. We used our mailing list for people who have signed up for our mailing list. We also had a mailing list that actually has 32,000 people on it. That's specifically for the forest plan. We used our social media pages that have over 17,000 followers. We put PSAs on the radio. We put out press releases to local media, the Carlsbad Current Argus, the Roswell Daily Record, the Ruidoso News, and the Mountain Monthly, based out of Cloudcroft, all covered forest plan revision at some point. Most of them also published the days of the public meetings and the comment periods when they were open.
Well, I guess I just missed it, but I sure don't think it would have been that hard to just send a letter to the stakeholders, which included the law. And I guess that's about it. Janet? I appreciate y'all's time.
Thank you.
I do thank you guys for spending all this time listening to us and going through all this and being on our side and helping us with this.
Could I get you to state your name for the record?
Yes, my name is Janet Cox, and I am allotment holder in the Guadalupes in the southern end of the Lincoln, which one of my forest friends that worked for the admin site there on the Guadalupes told us that the Guadalupes are the armpit of the Lincoln National Forest. And I think it's because we're separated and most of the money goes up to the other Sacramento and the Ruidoso area, which has two ways there that works. I'm going to come at this from a different area. We have a 50-section ranch, and it's kind of in the middle of the Guadalupes there, and just a tiny bit, from what I can tell of the map, affects us. But because all of the rest of the round that has been designated, proposed, if it goes into effect, it definitely affects our ranch, because all of the waters will be gone. Any water, there's no running water except on one ranch in the Guadalupes, and that's on private land. And there's another spring on another ranch that furnishes water for the majority of their ranch. And a lot of that ranch is designated proposed wilderness. If this goes into effect, all of those areas, all the wildlife will be on us. And right now, we have almost got every fence repaired and renewed, built new. We have one well that furnishes water for 8 pastures. And we have all the wildlife. Most of the elk are on us. And I noticed that you said the Game and Fish were cooperating with you on this. I talked to our local Game and Fish guy when I found out about this, which was a few months ago. He didn't know about it, and his boss didn't know anything about it. So if you talk to, evidently, the state, they do not go down and tell their people who work for them. And I'm with Tony on, we have had, if you started this in 2015, correct? Okay, we did go to a meeting early on about the planning, but nothing was said in there about wilderness. It was about how can we better use the Forest Service, what can we do in the Guadalupe area, and we talked about putting in some campgrounds and doing some stuff like that, but nothing about the wilderness. So we've had 7 annual meetings with the Forest Service. None of the was ever brought up. And last time, my husband just had his meeting this last week, and George was there because Renee was out. Renee has been great. And Joe asked George, why haven't we ever been told about this? He didn't know. So the stakeholders, the people who actually live and work on the land, should be the first people told about and brought into the planning of it. So we would appreciate a little more communication with things that affect us and our livelihood. And that is basically all I have to say. My granddaughter has a place that is adjacent to us. All of her place has been proposed for wilderness. Every bit of it, just like Tony's. They just bought this place and have had it about 2 years. Wanted to go, they are carrying on the tradition of our family. Our family started out in the Sacramentos, and we ended in the Guadalupes. Cox Canyon is named for my husband's family. We have generations that want to continue with agriculture. We all got to eat, so we need to take care of it. And that's all I have. Thank you so much.
Ms. Cox, thank you very much. There, any other ranchers or anybody else that?
Can I make one comment?
Yes,
Margaret,
sir,
you
Mr. Mayor.
asked if there's an obligation on the equip contracts, and I was talking to Stetson. We think the NRCS obligation is 20 years, is what we think. And it's mentioning something about value. Talking about the value of these allotments, my banker out of Lubbock, who I asked, how does this affect me? If, 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 if reduces your collateral value by 10%. And he said, and if it gets to become a wilderness area or a study area, we will no longer fund it. Your operating loan, we will not give you that. So there's a little bit of taste about value, what we're facing. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that, Mr. Adair. Representative Zell, you look like your words of wisdom for us. You have been ranching for a number of years, haven't you?
Thank you. Yes, just about all my life. I am Candy Spency Zell. I reside in Chaves County on a ranch west of town. Been a Chaves County resident all my life. I'm also a state representative. And ma'am, I could not understand what your comments were about how you get your releases out there. Did you say something in the neighborhood of 47,000 people? How many of those were from this area that's affected? And I need everybody in this room to be able to hear that.
Obviously not all of them.
You think? You know what? I really have a problem with this. Collaboration, there has been none. And this affects these people's livelihood. Mr. Chairman and members of all the commissions up here, thank you all for having the public here today. What a concept. We're the ones that pay the bills for the Forest Service. We're the ones that pay the bill for all these other entities that go on, but we're the last to know. Whenever this young lady over here, and it's nothing against you, okay? But it goes back to coordination, collaboration, conversation. But whenever we have school kids that don't even have the internet service, whenever all the COVID chondriacs were scaring us all to death, those kids could not even participate because the social media part of it wasn't part of their lives because of where they live. Mr. Chairman, members of our committee, of the commissions up here, I do get up on my soapbox, I get on my broom occasionally, and I fly around, and it doesn't bother me in the least to do that. We have had the problems that Mr. Stone has been facing for I don't know how many years, and that allotment was put in place before our state was even a state. We have the Center for Biological Diversity, CBD. Does that ring any bells? Well, I think there's something to be said there. They are trying to put all of us out of business, and whenever we have agencies like this stepping right alongside of them, it's disgraceful. It's absolutely disgraceful. If y'all have the opportunity, get you the latest edition of the New Mexico Stockman. If you want to read a letter that we wrote to the U.S. Forest Service over the slaughter of the estrays in the Gila, it'll make your stomach sick. And they did it through helicopters and snipers. That's what we're dealing with here, folks. Are they going to now turn those guns on us? That's what it seems like to me. I do appreciate you being here and representing the county. Your comments were very well received, and I can't remember your name. If we don't all stick together, folks, we're not going to have a life anymore. Our way of life is slowly being eroded by the special interest groups. And I hope these people over here understand who does pay their wages and that there is no common sense being used at all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative. Commissioner Zell, do you have anything to respond to?
Who, me?
Yeah. Well, we're going to jump to the next deal here, but I guess one of the questions that I've had listening to all this, and if my memory serves me correctly for these wilderness areas, you have to have a contiguous 5,000 acres, and And I see some of the slides up here, you know, county roads are going down the middle, and we're talking about having buffers, and so I'm just wondering within these plans, how any of those plans are all set up with 5,000 contiguous acres to do that. And I guess one of the questions, when you have county roads, and I know our hunters, and I see Mr. Cassabone sitting over there close by, but our hunters are, I mean, they are who they are, and they show up with their ATVs and their other motorized vehicles. And how do you have a county road going down the middle of like wilderness areas and don't have them stop to camp and head out into those like wilderness areas? I mean, I'm not sure that you guys probably have enough personnel to look at this. And so, I mean, that is of a concern. If you're going to break up your 5,000 contiguous acres and just say, well, there's a road running through here, so now we've got 2,500 over here and 25 over here, and that type of situation. So it just doesn't make any sense to me. And that's the problem that I think everybody here in the room has, is that we're looking for some common sense on this plan, and we hope that's what it comes to.
Mr. Chairman, may I just say something real quick?
Oh, Commissioner Dana, I'm sorry.
At the beginning of your presentation, you guys talked about comments, that you wanted to have presentations, make presentations and have comments. Will the comments of the people here be put into yours, or is it not official according to your language, official language?
They will be considered. Comments will be considered.
The comments that were made
Yeah,
here will be put into...
I've been taking notes.
Okay, they will be put into, because we've heard from a lot of people here that they didn't know about the meetings, and for some reason you're emphasizing comments more than counties, it seems like. And yes, they're very important, but I want to make sure those comments are included in your presentation and what you're trying to do, because their comments are very important. What they're saying is very important because those are their livelihoods. And they're not included in the 47,000 emails or Facebook page or whatever. So their comments today need to be put into the comments that you are going to present. And hopefully those comments will be considered, and hopefully those comments, but the one vital thing that they all have said is, it's up to Congress, and you know the makeup of Congress. So we're at the mercy of people. They can't do anything. They can make the presentations, they can take the comments back, they can present what they can present, but it's up to Congress. So keep in mind, hopefully, they'll let us know and let y'all know when it is presented to Congress, and that's when your voice needs to be heard too. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Dana. So what does our future look like here? What kind of commitments do we have? What kind of deliverables? Where do we go from here after this meeting with you guys to try and resolve this deal and get us to where we're at the table to coordinate with y'all on what is going to be the plan that is proposed, sent up to whatever the next level is? It's going to make a decision on what plan to go with. Where do we go from here? How do we get there?
So I very much appreciate the very specific feedback that we were provided. First by the allotment holders there on the Sacramento district of those 6 different allotments, and the new information on the Guadalupe allotment holders. So already that information, given as site-specific as it is, has been taken in by our team, right? I directed them to say, okay, let's look at that. Let's re-look at our evaluation to begin with, that set up what was proposed in there and enumerated in the different alternatives. There's different proportions there. And so that process is ongoing, and it's been substantive. There's a lot of new information there that we didn't pick up. And you know, that evaluation process was done mostly by looking at what we have on the books and what's in our maps and databases and that kind of thing. And some of that was missed, especially a lot of that infrastructure. So you can all tell just by the presentations, and this is what feedback I provided the allotment holders there, is that's a working environment out there. There's a lot of hands of man out there working and using that land, and how that affects. You spoke to, I forget who spoke to it, but you know, the existence of a county road with proposed wilderness on both sides. That speaks to the manageability of it, right? It's like, does this make sense in that context of having wilderness next to a public road and immediately next to it? That is something that is considered there too. So we are already taking these comments, generically, we call them comments in our process, and evaluating them, putting them through that, and that was my question, is this new information or did we already consider it? And it was new information. So that will be carried forth, and that's what we do with all of this feedback, is we look at it and say, is there something that should be changed in our forest plan or in the evaluation or the NEPA process, because they're kind of two different things. The forest plan represents our proposed action, and the NEPA is there to look at alternatives to that proposed action based on the issues that are identified to the proposed action. So that alternative B is kind of our telegraphing, this is what we're proposing to do based on other issues that we're getting in the comments. Here are the alternatives. And so there's different amounts of wilderness in those alternatives. So getting to the question, what's next? Well, what's next is we're doing that very thing, is incorporating that feedback and then looking at it, because how they showed up in the alternatives in terms of the difference in acreage was predicated on an evaluation that was a ranking, if you will, of those polygons, those land bases, chunks of ground that were up there that had those various characteristics, and we took into account thoughts of manageability, what is substantially noticeable, those kinds of you hear those terms. Well, that's how they're used, and so it's not a yes or no answer. It's kind of this continuum of how well they meet the wilderness standard. So this feedback that we've already gotten has already changed that criteria for us. As we re-looked at that and evaluated it, it's like, okay, this is no longer considered very high by the criteria that we used. We missed this information, and that has downgraded that ranking, which then informs what alternatives should it exist in. So that's where we're at. We're evaluating that, and that's how that will start to show up in the final plan and EIS, is when you start to see that. Now, with cooperating agency status, which is part of the process of the planning piece, as you point out, there's an opportunity for those that have cooperating status with us to get a little preliminary look at that, right? We're sitting there, we're cooperating and talking about what is in this plan and providing that feedback in an open way. And it's different than what we would offer the general public or nonprofit organizations or things like that. They're government-to-government kinds of cooperating agencies, and they're government agencies. So anyhow, there can be some opportunity. We haven't signed a cooperating agency status agreement as of yet. And then there's this other question at hand of coordinating status, which is part of the agenda. Maybe we're moving into that piece. And the current agreement that has been proposed to us and provided to us, in its current form, we can't sign that. I can't sign that. But I look to the spirit of that, and there's pieces to that that is really broader and ongoing management engagement, right? It's not just this forest plan event or this forest plan project. It's really much more about broader, longer-term coordination and ongoing coordination. I'm very interested in doing and setting up an outline or a structure of how we go about doing that through an MOU. So that's something that I want to continue to talk and align and even develop an MOU to do that. And in that sense, it would be implementing our current and existing processes that are already defined and then maybe doing it in a different way. Like NEPA requires public involvement processes. It requires us to disclose the consequence of our actions, of our proposed actions, and whatnot. So I'm very interested in that. As far as the here and now in this forest plan, getting on and getting to a place where we're signing on a cooperating agency status there, and then what that, at this stage of the game, because we're not going to stop our forest planning process. We are far down. We've invested a lot of time and effort and money in it, but that's not to say that I'm deaf towards feedback and input, whether we call it comments or deadlines. I want to know where you're coming from, and especially specifically how can we address those issues of conflict between our respective plans. And I can't do much about where our policy leads us one way and your planning goals or intent in your plans lead a different direction. I have to follow our federal laws, and we will. But we can get to the spirit of what's at your underlying interest. It's not about a legal battle. To me, it's about how do we reconcile the underlying interest that's being spoken to here, and so all respect to the courts and lawyers and whatnot, those are usually not very collaborative conversations. They're points of legal argument, and so I'm always one to go towards more of a cooperative, collaborative approach to understanding what the underlying interests are, such that influences the outcome, because at the end of the day, we're public servants, and through the various laws that authorize our activities, in many ways, that's the manifestation of that public feedback is those laws that are promulgated that govern us. So, but the local level and where the rubber meets the road is where I tend to spend my time and effort, and I think that's where the fruits of our respective labor from our respective agencies can come together and do right by the local area and the local economies and your interests. So I want to do that, and I want to pursue you in the context of right now having some legal status with this cooperating agency status with us that allow us to engage in a little bit different way, being able to see the products of our work, of our collective work, and review those and provide us feedback on those earlier than say the general public would, and that kind of thing. So as far as that longer term desire to provide for ongoing coordination and whatnot, again, that's something that I think can bear some fruit and that we should talk some more about, and then ultimately codify that in some kind of a memorandum of understanding that, and it may take the form of a lot of what was provided in that document to us, that draft. But in its current form, I think we've got to have, our process is we have a lot of standard language that goes into, there are our requirements and whatnot. And that's mostly, that feeder documentation and stuff that ties us to the sideboards of how we can operate.
So
But
Travis,
none of that is in there now. So.
let me ask you, are we 3 months out, 6 months out, 9 months, a year? And at what point in time can we come back together to meet to see where you guys are at on whether it's going to be Plan B and Plan C, or you're really doing this, so that we have that coordination and have that input on, and as you amend or adapt or do whatever after you're listening to all the comments we have. But, I mean, I think for us as local government, county commissioners that are all sitting here, we'd like to kind of have an idea of what the time frame is that this is going to be, what plan is going to be submitted, and hopefully when that plan is submitted, that we are all in agreement with that plan that does get submitted. And that goes back, that takes us back to part of the conversation I had earlier on in this meeting, is that we want to trust, and we want you guys to trust us, but we have to work to gain that trust on both sides. And so having another meeting sometime in the next 3 months, I don't know what the game looks like right now, whether it's 3, 6, 9, a year from now.
Yeah.
But it would really be good for all of us to know what the future looks like for this forest plan.
Well, as we talked about this, and I was thinking, and I'll rely on Diane to keep me honest here, because she's that principal person that's helping me with this planning. The first thing that comes to my mind, and the next step is, as was mentioned, we're working on addressing the myriad of comments that we already received. And how we do that is look at each of those. We may break down a letter and take its component parts and then ask ourselves, is this within the scope or outside the scope of this planning process, or is it substantive? How do we address it? And we go through that process of documenting how we address each of these comments. Is it a change to the standards and guidelines in the forest plan? Is it a change to, introductory paragraph, or whatever that comment may have looked at? We keep track of how we're dealing with those comments. And it strikes me with cooperating agency status is that, getting a look at that, you may be curious as to what is the spectrum of comments that we got and from whom, and how are we dealing with those comments in terms of changing from the draft document to the final document. That's the whole purpose of those comments, is to help us to do that. And that may be a juncture to get a look at that as we finalize those. Do you want to talk a little bit to the timing of at least what's on our timelines again? I know you hit on that at the beginning, but you might want to remind folks.
Okay, I'll do my best. We, on the forest, just completed our draft responses and edits, how we would add things or change things. That's now gone to the regional planner to look at. She's going to run through it, send back edits. We will make those changes. Then it goes back to the regional office for all the specialists at the regional office to look at it. And it really depends on all of their schedules. We'd probably be pretty firm in 4 months.
Do we get copies of those drafts?
So to make a long answer short, a year would be too long to wait to have us wait to meet again, in my opinion, and in the opinion of the forest. We're recommending potentially a quarterly meeting. Diane and Margaret are going to continue to work on getting some sort of MOU established that's agreeable to both parties. Unfortunately, we are the federal government and our processes are bureaucratic. But we already have that in the works right now to go through a formal grants and agreements process to create that MOU with you all. Then that's when we go into what Diane and Travis are talking about of reviewing the comments. If we have that MOU with you and you become an official cooperating agency, which is our hope, it would give you early access before it's released to take a look at that. I hope that helps clarify a little bit.
Well, go ahead, Commissioner Zell.
Here a little bit.
Go ahead, please do.
First of all, do you not agree with me that the Forest Management Act and FLIPMA require you to grant coordinating status to state and local governments with or without an MOU? We don't need to formalize. Your policy may say you can enter into MOUs, but the damn law says we've got that status already and you're required to follow those steps.
Now,
was that a nod of agreement?
No. Let's not put words in my
tried.
mouth. I know you're a great lawyer, but no, I would agree that the laws define that intent. They're in many of the laws. They're in public lands, the idea of cooperation, coordination, consultation. Right? That's a given. So when we go into an MOU, what we end up defining is how are we going to do that, in terms of the cooperating agency status. Now, I have to be honest with you. This is above my this is really a legal matter that I think lawyers talk about. And I talk with our counsel, Office of General Counsel, and the idea of being, of what coordinating status means. We acknowledge a cooperating agency status, right? It's something that is in our regs and whatnot. The idea that there's coordination agency status is a matter of legal debate, as far as I know.
Can I correct you? There is no such thing as coordination agency status. It's not for agencies, it's for local governments. Yeah. So it's just a coordination process. So that gets confused. There's cooperative agency status because that was created so agencies could cooperate in doing the EIS. Cooperative agency was really designed for agencies who can operate behind closed doors and have those discussions. Coordination is with the local governments who have to do something, have to do everything in front of the public. That's where all their decision making happens. So that's one of the unique distinctions. So just terminology, there is no such thing as coordinating agency.
Right.
It's just a process. And while I'm at it, I probably shouldn't have interrupted, Mr. Chairman. He's going to take my microphone.
Go right ahead.
I just along those lines and to follow on what the Commissioner was saying, if you want to give the counties that draft now, you could, for them to review. You really don't have to have the MOU for that. The MOU is really there because we understand that you don't like to advance a potential decision to the public without it being final, because then you get a lot of different, everybody kind of you get a lot of darts thrown at you when it's not your final decision. So we understand your process. That's what, that kind of an MOU process can help protect you from. But the Commissioner's right. We don't even need that, because you yourself as the forest supervisor could decide, hey, I'm going to advance. I understand you guys are elected representatives. Believe me when I say they deal with much more difficult and confidentially sensitive issues than a forest plan every day. And they can be trusted to handle those issues appropriately. So that's really just up to you if you want to do it.
And you're right. Because that's the intent of the law, is that we're coordinating. And it does, you're right, it does not require an MOU. And thank you for that distinction between the two. You said it much more eloquently than I could. So thank you.
Well, and I would, go ahead,
Let me
Commissioner.
keep going, Mr. Chairman. Fredo, can we get Travis's team a transcript of this meeting so that they don't have to rely on their notes? If you would make that happen, please. If you all would give Fredo the right person to get it to, so it doesn't
Diane.
rattle around on Travis's desk for a while. And one final question. I don't know, I haven't seen a lot of the maps and the overlays, but, and I'm going to ask this because the BLM didn't do it in considering the Carlsbad RMP. Have you overlaid the MOAs over this potentially, MOA is a military operating area? And I know some of my friends from the Boot Heel might disagree, but I think jet noise is the sound of freedom. And, but it also, by itself, destroys the solitude aspect that's required by law for a wilderness area. So I'd like to see maps where the MOAs are, because, you know, Holloman's got 3 squadrons of, well, that's graduate pilot training at F-16s. So they're going to be all over everywhere, and it'd be nice to know the Carlsbad guys didn't know what an MOA was, and we walked out of the little volunteer fire department in an area they were planning on designating, and thank God there was a contrail right over it. Yeah. And somebody up there doing Mach 2 turns. So if that hasn't made it into your planning, I would certainly suggest that it should.
I'm not sure exactly. I know we provide feedback to DOD on those NEPA documents that they produce on those kinds of things.
DOD's concern is protecting their MOAs,
right?
Not because your wilderness area isn't going to do a thing to their MOA. Right. Their MOA is going to statutorily reject
exactly
proposed designation.
and it becomes one of those things that we have to factor in and you know into the management of ours, and wilderness being one of them, right? Solitude and sonic booms don't go together very well, but it's something that does get factored in.
Well,
Mr. Chairman, I promise that's all I have.
Oh, no, thank you. Points are well taken. So as we kind of come to a close here, let's get another meeting set up within the next three to 4 months, number one. Number two, we are a coordinating agency, and so if you've already put together some type of a draft to go to the next level, we would like to have that without going to too much trouble to receive that. We should receive it, and I hopefully we'll have it before the end of the week if there's already a draft that's gone up to the next level. No, we won't be able to?
I contacted our grants and agreements folks and got a case worker assigned to us. I have made contact with him, described what it is that we're trying to do, and he is currently looking for examples that have already gone through the screening process with other forests working with counties to streamline it.
So let me ask you a question. Has that draft been completed and gone to the next level?
No.
Okay. So when do you anticipate that draft to be done?
I don't know.
Are we, let me, for a point of clarification, are we
talking
talking
about
about the same draft, right?
Well, you were talking
Draft of
about
our
a draft
comments?
with comments and things that
Okay,
was
that's-
already moving to.
That's what I thought you were talking about,
Okay.
and I think
I'm
you were
talking
talking
about
about
something
the
else.
MOU. So I know where you're headed, you know, and what we want to do. I want to provide that to you. Now, we have our process that we do our initial thought process, and then we run it by our regional office that gives us more technical support on that to make sure that we're in alignment with law, policy, and all of that kind of thing. So I want to have that review squared away and that we're right with the world there before we start providing you very draft. It's the drafty draft kind of thing. And so I would say that after we go through that, then we can entertain that and looking
Okay.
at that and coordinating on those kinds of
So
things.
another meeting, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, whatever's best, but at the same time, we don't need to have another meeting if it's going to be something that says, well, here it is. And we need to be part of we need to be part of the coordination. I mean, we do. And I think you've heard that today. And we really appreciate you guys being here. And you've heard it enough times already. We know you guys are doing your jobs. And we want to trust in the Forest Service, but let's all be open about this deal and do what's right for Lincoln, Otero, Chaves, and Eddy County. Yes, Commissioner Marquette.
Thank you for inviting me over here. I'm used to Otero County meetings. It's like the shootout at the OK Corral, so this has been pretty nice today. I was told by our county attorney that the Otero land use ordinance is not in the assessment, so we need to get that taken care of. And I'm just a simple country girl. I'm not an attorney. But from what I've seen from these assessments and all the improvements, how can they be included? I don't understand this. I mean, it just seems to me like it's so apparent that this whole thing is not been done right. I mean, there's so much imprint from man. I mean, if it's supposed to be virgin wilderness, I mean, that's like finding a virgin. I won't say that. That's not nice. I'm just saying, it doesn't seem virgin to me when there's all that stuff that's out there. So I hope that you'll take that into consideration. And I know the Little Bear fire up in Lincoln just about burned down Ruidoso, and I think a lot of that had to do with the designated wilderness area. So my concern and my heart is with our ranching families, and I think that's our truly endangered species in New Mexico, is our ranching families. And I think I would love for our Forest Service to work with us, because you're in our community too. I mean, you're New Mexico residents too, and I know that you guys catch a lot of heat. So work with us. Help us make this good for our ranching families. You know, let us be a partner in this, but don't screw them in the process. Because when we all say, oh, it's up to Congress, well, I'm not a go-with-the-flow kind of girl, and I'm not down for that. I mean, we are still free Americans, and this is still our land. And so just turning this all over to Congress and saying, oh, they can do whatever they want, I don't agree with that. So, I mean, we all have to stand together and fight together. So I appreciate being included in this today, and I just hope you'll consider that when you're doing your plan. Thank you.
And thank you.
Sure. So Mr. Barber?
Yeah, I just wanted to suggest you guys go talk to Jay Turner on the Cibola. He was very much a part of their plan, and he would be an example of a force that worked with the communities and the governments through a cooperating agency agreement and that. And also, I think this group needs your plan, your proposed final plan, before we have the meeting. That way we can talk intelligently about that and have conversations that instead of getting it at the meeting and then trying to play catch up. And we can send that to our county managers.
You're talking about the plan or the draft?
No, I'm talking about the plan that they're getting finalized through regional, through all these steps.
Yeah, that's a comment.
We've already got the draft. It's the one that is going to come back with all the regional comments and all that, and what he's put together from the comments he's received so far.
And that's what I've been talking about.
Yeah,
Right.
that's the one we want before the next meeting.
Right.
We don't want to talk about the draft anymore.
No. And yeah, I think-
It's not, hopefully it's going to change. Which begs my next question, and is, do you see the potential of the wilderness polygons changing? Either being limited by the comments you've seen so far and the comments you received today?
Yes.
Okay. I appreciate that, honesty. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barber. Mr. Bilberry. Oh, something else, okay. I think that's it. We'll work on getting another meeting put together, 3 or 4 months. We really appreciate you guys being here. Did you have something, Commissioner Proctor?
Once again, just like everyone is saying, we appreciate you being here, and I just want to echo as far as what we saw today, and y'all just being aware of that, being brought to your attention of what really has met and what has not met your description and your handbooks of what a wilderness should be. I believe we need to look back and see wilderness areas that are already in place and know that this is another overstep and outreach here that we've seen, and I'd sure like for y'all to consider that as well as the livelihood of everyone here that it's affecting. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Proctor. Thank you guys so much for being here. Commissioners from Lincoln, Otero, Eddy, Chaves County Commissioners, thank you all. Thank you to all of our ranchers. You're greatly appreciated, and keep raising that beef, and I'll keep buying it. Anyway, we are going to, as the Chaves County Board of Commissioners, we are going to go into recess for about 10 minutes. And so with that, thank you to everybody for being here.
Thank you. Appreciate the time.
This is